This video brings to light the sleek, invisible, insidious, and manipulative forces that secretly exert an influence on the making, structuring, and preservation of a society. It unveils the nature of the hidden power structures, which dominate a society and keep the powerful in power. Consider the following landscape of ideas to be suggestive, but not exhaustive, with any kind of finality on the topic. Michel Foucault unlocked a way of thinking about our modern world, which had serious consequences. He identified a powerful metaphor, one that showed us how we find ourselves centered in the midst of a diffusion of power. In his analogy of the panopticon, he showed us that the very fabric of our identity, our ideas, are governed by omnipresent forces, rules, and unassailable powers that keep us in line with the social order. In this picture, we see a guard tower enthroned at the very center of the prison. The architecture of this prison lends itself to the effect that every prisoner is caught in the crosshairs of being continually observed. In effect, they never escape the constant surveillance of the guards, and it is that very force of power which helps them maintain their obedience. This is the essence of our investigation, our starting point, as we begin to untangle the complex web of power relations we find ourselves in, to begin our process of liberation. We are led to believe that everything has a structure. This is one of the fundamental teachings of Western philosophy, structuralism, and science. Brick by brick, concept by concept, we are led to dogmatically accept that every concept has an impenetrable foundation, a footpath that can always be traced to a beginning. But what happens when we pry open the steel walls and look underneath? Guy Debord was a French philosopher who brought a profound thought to the center stage of social consciousness in the late 1960s when he voiced the idea of the spectacle, a concept defined as a kind of layering of reality. Quote, in all of its particular manifestations, news, propaganda, advertising, entertainment, the spectacle, in his words, represents the dominant model of life. From the perspective of Deleuze and Guattari, they define an organization of power as a, quote, regime of signs, or form of expression tied to an assemblage that is fully functioning. For example, consider the white male European power structure and its charged will to disenfranchise women, ethnic minorities such as blacks, Asians, Hispanics, homosexuals, religions other than Christianity, and other denominations that fall under the category of, quote, the other. The mantle of a power structure can be traced to a culture, history, and but not limited to a religion that manifest in forms of various institutions. Power structures often emerge in the form of signs that aim to wire the social order. Sometimes they accomplish this act through an inversion of meaning or a manipulation of a sign relationship. Power structures are often built on a foundation of arbitrary distinctions, using a structuralist tendency where two scenes are chronologically juxtaposed to reveal an arbitrary meaning. Meaning is a product of assemblage, and as Deleuze and Guattari observe, the assemblages combine into a regime of signs, or a semiotic machine. The assemblage becomes a power structure at the defining point at which its concepts are structured into a fixed hierarchy of meaning that is homogenized, centralized, and standardized. Think of the slippery concepts such as class, race, gender, caste. It is the very nature of a structure to define boundaries. That is how it anchors a particular meaning. But what happens when we demonstrate the falsity of a foundation? It is in the relationship between the signifier and the signified that meanings can be deconstructed with an almost scientific accuracy, which lies at the very heart of the two language movements of structuralism and post-structuralism. One technique of power is when, quote, like all stereotypical notions, one often speaks of the masses as one speaks of the people, magnifying their numbers, their strength, their mission. One invokes them and pretends to write on their behalf when one wishes to give weight to one's understanding or to justify it.
But we had a massive field of people. You saw that, packed. I get up this morning, I turn on one of the networks, and they show an empty field. I said, wait a minute. I made a speech. I looked out. The field was, it looked like 1.5 million people. They showed a field where there were practically nobody standing there. We had, honestly, it looked like 1.5 million people, whatever it was. But it went all the way back to the...
And then there is the profusion of short, repetitive phrases that command life, the order words that tell us how to think.
Win anymore. We don't win anymore in our country, Sean. We don't win anymore. We used to win. We don't win anymore. We don't win with trade. We don't win with war. We can't even beat ISIS. And we're going to win. If I win, I will tell you, if I win, we all win because we are going to win.
We also find heavy abstractions of reality, a blending of fiction, and a reduction of facts, a way of narrowing in on a particular notion to make it align with a certain agenda. By stripping language of its history and meaning, inserting ordered words, we find one of the secret power structures in all of its force. And then there is the insidious aspect of the power structure that aims to dismantle anything that questions its validity, truth, or power, which in that very moment is assigned, quote, a negative value, condemned as that which exceeds the signifying regime's power, Deleuze and Guattari. It is the very nature of the power structure to never admit, 1, they are wrong, 2, they are inaccurate, 3, their foundation is questionable. Think Orwellian.
Go ahead.
Can you say categorically,
she's asking a question.
Mr. President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you
No,
give
I'm
us
not
a
going to give you
question?
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically?
And everybody said I won the
wait.
debate. Everybody said I won all 6 debates, and especially the last one. Everybody said I won that debate. Every online poll said I won every one of the debates, especially the last one.
In a world infiltrated by a grid of power relations, we find words stripped of their free will. Words are electrified with meaning, inheriting the ideas charged into them by the thundering power structures. Our language is not neutral. It is commanded by the voice of the powerful. Meanings are not allowed to enter a prism of interpretation, as postmodernism wants us to see. They are implicitly decided for us. We are taught to forfeit individualism in exchange for a certain version of the truth. We need to call into question the forces that assert themselves as authorities of truth. Let us remember that there was a time where the word legal was used to protect and enforce the notion of slavery. Power structures work by naturalizing their ideas and pretending representation does not exist. That is one of the big ideas of Roland Barthes, where he wanted us to see that unbiased access to truth does not exist, but this idea is manipulated by those who sit at the throne. But when we think about our linguistic situation carefully, we realize that those in power have morphed into an intermediary with privileged access to construct reality based on their linguistic semantic representations and popularity. One of Barr's major points is that truth in our society has been colonialized and that we need to assert ourselves as individuals. Barthes gives us a conceptual toolkit, a way of analyzing how language is used in a structure of 3 tiers, or 3 levels of reality. The first level is truth in its raw form. The second is how truth is represented. which he calls the second order level of meaning. And then our empowering third level, how we reframe the context, the voice, and inject truth back into the soul of reality, to unanchor the power structure from acting as an intermediary, to define what is true and what is not true. To rebuild our own rhizome of meanings, we must cast a suspicious eye on any force which represents itself as semantically unassailable, inaccessible, because many aspects about our usage of language and meaning is a byproduct of social construction. We have sold our souls to the ideologies voiced by the dominant language, advanced by the hegemonic powers. We have been sold representational realities, the dominant images, voices, and have mistaken the eye of the camera for our own individual truths. As James Baldwin says, a language comes into existence by means of brutal necessity. For example, take note of Frantz Fanon's book title, which questions the fixed binary in a clever way. Black skin, white mask. This exemplifies Barr's suggestion of the third order of language, which takes back language from the hands of the oppressors, gives a voice to the voiceless, and redefines the context, the third level of meaning. First, we must escape the idea that truth is fixed, unchanging, objective, and absolute. We must admit the arbitrariness of language, meaning, and the fluidity of identity. We must identify the dominant culture and ideology. We must realize that meanings are complex assemblages, that they are not merely the outcome of one single thing, identity or meaning. We must examine our everyday language and reinvent the meaning of meaning. We must not simply ask, is it true? But we must actually do our own research, cross-reference our conclusions, and intellectually determine the validity of a truth claim. We must not simply ask, is it true? But why was a claim made? Who said it? And what social effect will it have on a group of people who believe it to be true?